5, and we are back for another episode of Cloud Talk Live. That's right. It's my Monday because we were off yesterday here in the U.S. for our Independence Day celebrations, which were fantastic. All right, I want to welcome you to Cloud Talk Live, another episode of our program here. But first thing you get to do is introduce yourselves. You see, while this is a bunch of great information we bring to you, whether it's news, whether it's what's going on in the cloud or updates from the cloud providers and our great discussion, all of this happens with you. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself in the comments and tell me who you are. Tell me where you are so that we know who you are, where you are. And it makes it a lot easier to have a conversation when you know someone's name. So go ahead, introduce yourselves. Folks, if you want to get a hold of us for any reason over here at the program, you can do that by sending us an email at solve@rackspace.com. And that comes to the whole production team. Daniel gets it, Julia gets it, Megan gets it, I get it. The whole crew gets it. So we would love to hear your input. All right. So with that, everyone, I want to remind you that everything that we do here, I got to push that button right over there, is part of the RackSpace Solve Thought Leadership Program. Now, thought leadership here at RackSpace is intended, of course, to be just that and not a sales thing. So you're never going to get sold to at RackSpace, except one thing. It's coming up a little bit later. Ooh, Wasim from Dubai. You're going to love next week's episode. You might even be able to contribute, but I'll have to tell you that later. All right. So with that, folks, I want to remind you to head over to rackspace.com/solve. I said we don't sell to you there, but you can find all of our information, whether that's articles, whether that is our most recent research or podcasts. For instance, this podcast here that we've had Josh Pruitt on talking about our latest research around what's going on in compute. Hey, someone's in from Bangladesh. That's really cool. Also, we've got one coming in from a podcast with Keith Lorenz, and Keith is CTO over at App Dynamics. Had a great conversation with him. Actually, it's from a recording that we did when we were live at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio, just a few weeks ago. Well, everyone, I want to take a look and see who's coming in here. We've got India, England. Hey, welcome from England. Amsterdam is here. Lots of folks from India, Dubai, as I mentioned. That's fantastic. All right. Well, folks, as a reminder, we are in the middle of our summer road trip. Now, today we are going back because we have a new topic to address, but I want to do it from a location where we've been once before, and that is from around in, yeah, that doesn't look good. Over in Singapore. All right, let's go check that out. All right, Singapore. So live from Singapore, we have Umesh, and Umesh is our data services delivery lead. Now, Umesh has many, many years working in and around IT. And most of that time has been spent in data in one company or another. Been at RackSpace for 10 years, almost 11 years, if what I read in LinkedIn is true. So why don't we go ahead and bring Umesh up onto the stage and introduce him. Umesh, welcome to Cloud Talk Live.
Hey, good morning, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Oh, so glad that you are here. I know a lot of times doing this sort of thing is a little bit different than delivering data day in and day out. But how long have you been working in data, Umesh?
So I think pretty much my career for 17 years doing data. We were Just Analytics, which got acquired by RackSpace early this year. So yeah, it's been 11 years at RackSpace, Just Analytics combined, yeah.
Just amazing. I'm so glad that you are here helping with that. Hey, Pune, India is here. That's fantastic. Mexico, we got a Racker, Cloud Consultant is here as well. Isn't it interesting, Umesh, all the folks from around the world who tune in and we get to spend a little time with?
Definitely, I think it's quite interesting to see.
Well, we talk about data, and when I get into some of the news articles, and I get into a little bit later into the updates from the cloud providers, data is not a singular topic. Data is also one of those areas that I believe is growing so incredibly fast as a discipline, as a capability to different organizations. Hey, a fellow Texan is here. I think. Welcome. But one of the areas we're going to dig into today, specifically in and around data, of course, is the data catalog. So, Umesh, let's start with what is a data catalog?
So data catalog in nutshell is a set of metadata management combined with data management and searching and capabilities. So that's the fundamentals. It's a metadata about your data, which is lined up with a lot of tooling, which is not just search, but the automated curation capabilities, the crawling, the ways for you to annotate and extend the metadata, which is auto-generated. So it's a suite uh, of things which is going to enable data governance, data curation, data stewardship, all the three. Yeah.
Right, and what it ultimately helps is the connectivity of helping just folks who are trying to get to a point of a solution, and utilizing the right data, the right reports, looking at the right reports, knowing who curates that information, and so that becomes really quite a value, because as we've all heard the stats that as time goes by, the amount of data that's in the world, grows on a what is it? It doubles every couple of years, and so having a way to understand the data that's inside of your organization and understand, who has the ability to access that, what the data is, who owns that data becomes super important. And one of those ways is personas. So maybe step us through a little bit about personas and how that's important in a data catalog.
Definitely. So there are primarily, if you look at the metadata around the personas of the given data set, I think three things come out. You have a business data owner who is focusing on the data privacy or the data definitions. The second persona which you care about is technical data owner, who is sort of owning the data SLAs and the technical metadata around the data. And finally, you have data producers, which is another persona, or sometimes it can be also classified as data stewards. These are the people who actually govern the more granular definition and the lineage, etc., of the data. So you have business data owner, technical data owners, which are covering the access part of it, the SLAs and the OLAs around the data.
Yeah.
And you have technically the data producers or data stewards, who could be the third persona you could care about when it comes to the metadata.
Yeah. So with that, Umesh, when we think about different personas that work inside of the organizations, and of course, what their roles are, what they're doing, maybe give us an example. It always helps, I find, to give tangible examples of how some of this stuff is used. But tell me, in
Sure.
a data project, in the day in the life of somebody working in data, how is a data catalog actually used?
Sure. So definitely, the first thing which you care about is the data discoverability. So, for example, if you have all the interesting data which your organization is lining up for various use cases, or even use cases which you haven't even imagined, you are making sure that the data is discoverable, and so that's the first thing which you care about. And the personas who would really care about discovering what data sets are up there and the definitions around them, it's not just uh, the downstream users who are going to use it purely to further enrich those data and build downstream data sets, but also people who are just consuming that data set purely for reporting, etc. So the first persona is the consumer of the data, which is either using that to chain it further or just using it as an end product. The second persona it's sort of the governance teams who are trying to figure out that whether we are meeting certain SLAs and all, because data catalog is not just lining up the metadata about the data, but also some of the SLAs and uh, the audit trails around the freshness of the data, etc. So you will have other set of, I would say, personas who are like data governance teams, or even some operational teams who wants to know the various metadata. The third personas are the data security and the teams which are trying to ensure that a certain governance is being established around those data sets. So these are the folks who would make sure that a right set of access control information is defined or described around the data set, so that somebody coming and discovering this data set knows which access groups he or she needs to apply, etc. So you have, that's the third persona. Even the downstream users who are consuming the reports, etc., they would want to come to this data catalog and sometimes sort of chalk bag and see the lineage, etc. So I would say that it's a range of personas. I have worked for customers where it is the go-to place for any data worker, I would say. And I think we all have turned out to be some other way working with the data. So whether I'm an analyst, whether I'm a stakeholder, whether I'm a governance person, whether I'm an ops guy, I just need a lot of information about what's happening with those data sets.
Right.
So
Now,
they're adding a lot of value and they're getting more richer. Yeah.
so is it in a lot of ways, we think about different types of governance activities. I assume it's not a one and done. Of course, a lot of work to get a governance plan put in place, and as this being part of that. But is this the kind of thing that needs to be curated over time?
Perfect. So I would say that a lot of this tooling which has come along in the recent world, they have a fair bit of automation. So for sure, there is a part where it's trying to uh, crawl the new data sets, find the delta, make sure they get cataloged, and even there is enough of semantic inference and all which is done automatically. But there's a whole lot of curation which happens by the data curators as you do a curation of your paintings. So data curator is one of the main functions. These are the folks who are trying to make sure that the right data is shown up on the catalog with the right definitions and right annotations, right tagging, etc. So it's a combination, I would say. There's a whole lot of automation with AI ML being chucked into the mix. Plus, there is a certain discipline, a certain set of focus personas. I would say personas here, the curators, which could include data producer or technical data owner or the business data owner. They would try to top up that metadata with additional information. And as a combine, it's a combination of AI with human efforts to bring together a richer catalog.
Well, I'm glad you brought up AI and ML and automation, because as the amount of data increases globally, but of course inside of our own organizations, I would think that it would become next to impossible to have an understanding of all of the data that's there. So looking to automation, looking to AI and ML to connect a lot of those dots, so that ultimately, the folks who are looking after that data catalog, the curation of it, they're making smaller adjustments, not having to manipulate all of the information that's coming in.
Exactly, yeah. Definitely, that's the key thing. And I think the AI goes further up to search and other capabilities. So it's not just stopping at the crawling stage, but making sure the search are very relevant, the ranking is very relevant, because it's not just the volume of data, it's the amount of different data sets. People are just churning out new data sets in a matter of minutes and hours. I mean, gone are the days where it used to take like 3 months to get a new data product out.
Yeah.
We see customers who produce downstream data cards and all within a matter of days. And it's important to get all that showing up on the catalog.
That's pretty incredible. So the data catalog, we've talked a lot about the technical information that it holds. Talked about some of the contextual information that becomes super important to help make sure that the right people can get to the right data at the right time.
Exactly. So one thing which I always tell to my folks is that you could always document a data set on a wiki, but just imagine that the tool is very general purpose. But if you have something which is in the context, first of all, you have a baseline technical metadata like table name, column names, all this is curated for you. And all you need to do is now capture all the metadata, which could include a business definition, a glossary term, which it links to, or even the life cycle, whether it's being deprecated through. So keeping that information in context of the catalog can do much better job than keeping it in a silo on a wiki page and all. So as you rightly brought up, there's a base context which you have, that which table or which data set is being spoken about, and there's a string of information which can be captured in a very structured way. So most of the modern generation tools, they let you capture a lot of metadata, starting from the life cycle, whether it's getting deprecated or there's a new version available, to the data owners and the data curators, to the business terms that links to the access groups through which you can get through to them, the last refresh timeframes, the SLAs, even to an extent where they give you to see, to sort of assess and check whether the sample data, how it looks. So it gives you a lot of context, and which you can further add up by bringing in things like the definitions, etc., etc. So I think you're right that the amount of context which you can throw in to make that whole discovery and I would say assessment, which you do post discovery to know whether this data fits your purpose, is just enormous. And I think the tools are pretty all set now to give that capabilities.
Yeah. So quick shout out to a couple of folks who are in here. We've got Fernando and Michael, both from Houston, just a little bit east of here. Okay, about 3 hours east of here. And Fernando wanting to be a racker. Fernando, go to rackspace.jobs. That's the only thing I'm selling here is you guys coming to work for us. And check that out. I'll be talking about some jobs shortly, but they're a little bit south of where you are. So I don't know if that's going to work for you. But Umesh, in our last few minutes, let's talk really quick about, we hear a lot about data mesh. How does the data catalog fit into a data mesh and become much more important in that construct?
Sure. So data mesh has primarily 4 tenants, just to brief through them. The first tenant is the domain centricity. Second is data as a product. Third is the self-service infrastructure. And fourth is the federated governance. So I think data catalog fits into 2 of them. The data as a product. When you say data as a product, like you buy a biscuit packet, you have ingredients, you have a self-describing product there, which has a lot of things tagged along with that. So when you look at data as a product, the first thing you need is all the labeling and all the descriptions and all the annotations. That's the first thing, first pillar of data mesh, which it enables. The second is federated governance, which talks about the PII labeling of the data, all the way to the access controls, the SLAs and OLS, which is operational level assurance, and the service level. So all that can again be sort of tagged along through a common governance tooling, which could be enabled by data catalog as well. So I think those are the 2 main pillars where it really plays out a critical part. And even self-service infrastructure, one of the key element up there is that can I discover the data sets? So I think pretty much it's quite prominent, I would say.
Well, Umesh, thank you so much. Data catalogs, folks. It is, if you're one of those areas that I think is amazing, if you're thinking about getting into a specific discipline and around data, being the folks who help to curate that and make it available is super important. So Umesh joining us live from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening, our morning, to be with us here today. Thanks so much.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. All right, folks, let's push a few buttons and get us back on target here. Super interesting about that data catalog. Are you guys using data catalogs? Are you involved in that in any way? Comment. Tell us about what's going on there. Love to hear from you. All right, let's continue with our morning here. And a reminder that all of this information is available over at rackspace.com/solve. We're not selling to you there. We are just bringing you great information. All right, well, that's our cloud discussion. It's going to take us over to This Week in Cloud. Quick reminder, what is This Week in Cloud? Well, that is the time when I go grab a couple of cloud articles and tell about why it is important, why they are important to you. So with that, let's jump into This Week in Cloud. And our first article, this one's super interesting, folks. We have crossed a threshold here. And that threshold is enterprise IT spend. And guess what's happening? IDC came out with an article that as they looked at the data from Q1 of 2022, I think is where we are. And what they found is that there is officially now more spend happening in enterprise IT in the cloud than on-prem. We've crossed that. There aren't that many more of these thresholds that we're crossing. There aren't too many left, or maybe there is. But that's a big one, folks, to have more enterprise money going towards the cloud than going towards on-premises infrastructure. And that's in keeping with, let me go back. That's in keeping with some of the data that we found in our research where we went out and asked companies and said, how many of you think that in the next 5 years, you envision a time where you won't have a corporate data center? 56% said that they wouldn't have a data center. How about you guys? You guys have data centers still, or have you moved it all off to the cloud? All right, next article, Hydra. What a cool name for a company. Well, they're part of the December class of Y Combinator here in 2022. And we're all familiar with Snowflake and the data warehouse that is. And of course, it is a commercial endeavor. Of course, that means it does cost some money. Well, Hydra thinks it should be built on open source technology. So what they have done is they've gone out. Hey, David, glad that you're here. they have gone out and come up with a way to build this on top of Postgres. Now, as this type of tooling inside of enterprises becomes more and more ubiquitous, their founder and CTO both come back and say that they think that it is important that this type of technology be built on open source solutions. So interesting. It would be interesting to see if they're able to actually pull that off. All right, so with that, we're going to move over to our cloud releases, and we'll start, as most always, with Amazon. Amazon Workmail now supports invoking lambdas to fetch availability. You know, that free busy stuff that I go to Outlook to look for. And but the reason I bring this up is I love seeing when cloud providers create new capabilities in one of their services that's built on another one of their services. Cool stuff. And if you can connect it in this way, think about other ways that you can connect. If your organization is using AWS for a lot of what you do, well, how could you connect more and more of those things together? All right, with that, also, we're going to go over to Azure, and Azure has, now we're getting back into storage and into data. Public preview, Microsoft PureView data storage for Azure storage. This is some cool stuff. What it actually enables you to do, and this is to get rid of data redundancy. You can actually create shares of data that's inside of Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 or blob storage accounts inside or across organizations to share that data with other folks. So where it's near real time being made available without having to create a duplicate of that data, which is, of course, a good thing. All right, and in keeping with our data conversation, as we head over to Google Cloud, BigQuery has updated their JDBC drivers for BigQuery, and apparently there were some issues there, and the issues they fixed were they were getting stack overflows in some cases when executing long and complex queries. And hey, if you're going to have a query, why not make it long and complex? Because you know what can handle it? They can handle it over at BigQuery and GCP. All right, I've said it 3 times today. I'll say it one more time. I'm not here to sell you anything except coming and hanging out with Daniel and Benjamin and I. So the job of the day. Now, normally in the job of the day, I grab a job. That's why it's singular. But I've changed it up. I didn't change the graphic, though. Because when I went looking for what we have available for jobs here at RackSpace, and you can very easily get there by going to rackspace.jobs and checking it out, there is a title that says Hot Jobs LATAM. Latin America is what we're talking about there. So what I've brought, and I'm just realizing also I didn't fix a typo, so you're going to see it coming up shortly, but there are a ton of jobs available in our Latin America region. So specifically in Mexico, that's Mexico City, Jalisco, Nuevo Laredo, or Querétaro. Business product manager, business systems RPA, business systems manager, analyst utilizing RPA, Java software developer, full stack automation engineer, senior strategic architect. That's specifically in Salesforce, Linux engineers, virtualization engineers. I need cloud engineers across GCP, Azure, AWS, OpenStack, and Kubernetes cloud engineers as well. I need folks in data. We need them in SAP. And then down in Chile, if you're down that way, we need folks who are AWS solution architects. So if you are any of these things and you're in any of those regions, folks, head over to rackspace.jobs, look for the LATAM Hot Jobs heading, and you also can apply for those jobs right there. All this information available over at rackspace.com/solve. Head on over and even subscribe to the podcast where you'll get the audio from this as well as lots of other content. All right, as always, a big thank you to our friends over at AppDynamics, the leaders in full stack observability. Last week, we did an episode with an engineer and a CTO. Keith Lorenz was on, and we had an amazing conversation around the capabilities of full stack observability, not just monitoring around your applications. People, we want to actually connect those applications and their performance to key business drivers. There are so the what company that comes to mind when I think about that is, of course, AppDynamics. So go check them out. Well, next Tuesday, we're back here with George Paulson, who's the general manager from our Middle East region and Africa region. So we're going to learn what is happening in the cloud in those regions. I'm really excited to hear what George has for us. Well, folks, That is going to do it for another one of our episodes here this morning. Please join us next Tuesday with George. He'll be here. We'll be back for another episode of Cloud Talk Live.